Thanks for joining us on By Subject, a Silicon Slopes brand and marketing podcast. I'm your host, Peter Stevenson, and in this episode, my co-host Alysha Smith and I had a chance to sit down with Beau Oyler, founder of Enlisted Design and Chief Design Officer of Pattern. Welcome. Thanks for being our inaugural Silicon Slopes marketing podcast, yet to be named podcast guest.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm Peter Stevenson. I'm a partner at Modern 8, and I'm here with Alysha Smith, the managing partner and creative director.
Hi.
Of Modern 8 and
Excited
agency.
to be here. Excited to finally meet the
Yeah, it'll be fun.
So,
rock star.
Yeah, rock star. That's a good point. So the point and emphasis of what we're trying to do is talk about the marketing in Silicon Slopes community, the great people who are putting that forward. Kind of what we're trying to do is highlight the companies and people who are making great marketing here. And your name came up, and as somebody who we've seen and been excited about what Enlisted and you're doing with Pattern. So, maybe give us a little bit of background on you, your history, where you grew up, where you went to school, kind of what that initial marketing job was that you were interested in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So from California native, born and raised there, grew up on the Central Coast, a little town called Carmel, it's a couple hours south of San Francisco.
I think I've heard of it.
Yes, it's a cute little spot. Grew up surfing and hiking and just, golfing and being there on the peninsula. And then went to school and studied architecture first and then graphic design. And then I was introduced to industrial design. And when my architecture teacher said, "Oh, you should check out this thing called industrial design," I discovered it, flew out to San Francisco like the next weekend, went to the academy, took a tour, and I walked in and it was like a revelatory experience. Like this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
Huh.
Because it was the design of physical things, physical experiences. And so, and so went to school and started my career there. But it kind of starts before then. Like my grandpa was in LA and he taught design, which all they ever referenced was design in LA for 30 years at a college there. And I used to go to school with him to the shop, and he drove this cool little Porsche 914, and we go and we just make stuff. And like he'd be like, "What do you want to make?" And I'm like, "Well, I want to make a door knocker, or I want to make a whatever." And we would just go to the shop and make it. And so he kind of like incepted this idea that you can make something out of nothing.
That's cool.
And I had never heard the term industrial design until I was already at the academy, went back and visited my
interesting.
grandparents. And I said, "Yeah, I'm studying industrial design." And they laughed. And I'm like, "Wait, you've heard of it?" And they're like, "What do you think your grandpa taught for 30 years?" Like they're all industrial designers, all those students.
Yeah.
And so it just all kind of came together and clicked for that.
So is the term industrial design a newer term?
It's not. No,
okay.
it's not. It's been around since
Yeah.
Dieter Rams and the old school design. It's reference to the design of physical objects.
Yeah.
So that can be cars, it can be shoes, it can be apparel, it can be packaging, structural packaging. And so industrial design has nothing to do with industrial or mechanisms or engineering, right? It has to do with creating these like lustful objects that people want.
And you have seen that Dieter Rams
Oh yeah,
documentary.
very much so.
Oh my
Objectified.
Oh,
I love it.
so good.
Yeah. So now 1011 did the soundtrack, and it's so good.
Oh, it is. I've seen it more than once.
Yeah, for sure.
So when was that? What was that? So you came out of school, you had industrial design. What was that first job in design, marketing, creating experiences for people?
Yeah, so I had this epiphany in school where I'm there for industrial design, and so it's just you're working 20-hour days every 7 days a week for 3-4 years, and it's all about industrial design. And at the time, I was also working at Crate and Barrel just as a stock as an apron, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, gosh, it seems like there's more to it than just the product. And I started thinking about packaging. I started thinking about branding. These are all terms that I hadn't even thought of. And so in school, I started, my junior year, started kind of shifting from just designing the product to then creating entire in-store experiences where my design, I would make in the model of it, but I'd also design out the packaging. I'd also design out the POS. I'd also design out this, experience. And so even within school, I kind of had this idea that maybe there's more to it than just the product.
Yeah.
But industrial designers will never admit that. Like there's so much ego around the product itself, the physical product. And so then I started my career at Williams-Sonoma as a staff designer, designing, kitchenwares. And
is that based in California too?
Yeah, in San Francisco.
Okay.
So this is all happening in San Francisco in like circa 2001, 2002, 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And then finished up, started working in 2004 at Williams-Sonoma, and launched 7 products while I was still in school, some of which are still in the store today at
Like
Williams-Sonoma, like the nesting melamine mixing bowls
Okay.
and barbecue tools, and their entire soaps and lotions line. I did all of that, like literally hand lathed the models while I was still in
Oh
school.
my gosh, I had some of that.
Yeah.
The soaps.
Yeah, good.
When you were there and you were starting to think about brand and experience, how did Williams-Sonoma accept some of those ideas, or did you bring some of that ideas to Williams-Sonoma?
I did, yeah. So I was on the product team, but then also started working with the packaging team about 6 months in, and became really interested in the packaging as well, because I wanted kind of multiple touch points for the consumer, and I wanted to curate that experience. And so then I went from there. I knew I wanted to go agency side. Like from day one, I knew I wanted to be at agencies. And so then I went to a studio, an agency called New Deal Design. And I was on the first Fitbit team. Like literally the night James Park came into the studio, I was there and got to design the first Fitbit.
Oh
and
my gosh.
It was really, really exciting.
Yeah.
And we did, the whole thing. It was product, packaging, the brand, the logo, everything. And so I'm like, okay, this is what I want. Like, I want to do more than just design the product. I really want to create cohesive experiences that consumers are going to lust after.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of started that. So then when I was ready, I was lead designer at New Deal, and I was ready to start doing my own thing. I actually didn't want to conflict with the industrial design side of things. So for 2 years, I worked about 50 hours at New Deal and about 50 hours nights and weekends doing my own stuff, but it was all branding, packaging, motion graphics, video,
interesting.
launch.
Okay.
And I was working for Clorox and Nestle and White Wave Foods and like big CPG brands.
And how did you break in, as a solo freelance, if you will, to some of those big brands?
So at the time, New Deal was like top 5 studio in the world
Okay.
at the time.
So
And
you
so
made the
just the fact that I was lead
connections.
designer there, there's actually no connections of New Deal at all.
Huh.
It was just within my network, people reaching out and saying,
So neat.
hey, I've got a colleague who needs this. They are thinking about launching a brand in this. Like, could we talk? And so we just started having these conversations. And they're like, yeah, our budget's only like $50K. And I'd be like, I can work with that.
Yeah. Turns
And
out.
so it kind of just started little like that. And then, and we just started cutting our teeth and then really learning how to do it on the non-industrial design side.
Okay.
So then when I broke off of New Deal, then I was able to bring ID in and we were able to begin to create these cohesive brands with
When
our
you
clients.
say we, did you jump with somebody else?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. A friend of mine, Jared Aller, super talented designer, industrial designer. We went all through the academy together, and then at Williams-Sonoma together, and then at New Deal together, and started moonlighting together. And then we broke off and co-founded Enlisted. And then about 7 years later, bought him out, and then he moved to the East Coast and is
Okay.
VP of innovation at a big company there.
And how did your former? How did they take How did they take it? You starting off and starting your own thing. Was it amicable or was it?
It was like on
Yeah.
the surface, it was for
Yeah.
sure. And I think part of him, the owner, was proud of us, and part of
Yeah.
him was also pissed.
Yeah.
And you know how it is. You have these people that are
Yeah.
like, you love them, you love working with them,
Yeah.
but that also is like, dude, go do it.
Yeah.
Like, how can I help you? That's what
Yeah.
I always say.
Good.
And so it was amicable. We couldn't put any of our work up on the site, so
Yeah.
we did get a cease and desist right away, like a week later. So we had to pull stuff off, and that makes it difficult to market yourself.
Right.
But it just took time for our design work to get up there.
Yeah.
So, and that was like 15 years ago that this happened.
2008.
Yeah, 2008. It's the best time to start
Best
a company.
time.
It's probably a really interesting milieu in the valley during Oakland and San Francisco during 2008. There's a lot of huge startups now that started as that group. So tell me what that world was like in Oakland, San Francisco in 2008, 2009 as you were launching.
It was scary, right? Because you have the housing crisis and you have kind of the economic meltdown that was happening. The play that we didn't strategically make the decisions based on what was happening in the economy, but what worked was that we had a lot of big agencies around us that big brands were working with, okay? And they are like, you can't even call IDEO for under $1 million.
Yeah.
You can't even call Frog for under $1 million. You can't even call, Wieden and Kennedy. I guess they were small at that time, but it's like the budgets were so big that they began, especially in the big CPG brands, they began thinking, okay, who else is out there, whether it's freelancers or little studios that we could do good work with, but isn't going to cost us the same amount. And so it was actually really good timing for a small studio to start popping up. And because we had been moonlighting for 2 years, we had a pretty good roster. So then when we were full time, it was just like, let's go.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's actually really good timing for us.
How interesting.
And so, I've heard that from other agencies where they talked about that era as like people, bigger brands looking for smaller people. We're in the middle of sort of that right now. Are you seeing some of that same, bigger brands looking for smaller agencies, including you as
sure.
you're a kind of a bigger agency now, Enlisted, and your pattern, and tell me a little bit about what you see in the marketplace now compared to there.
So we are and we aren't. So Enlisted's only 60 people between both studios. So we're still not a big agency, and certainly not as big as, the Turner Duckworths or like the big agencies. And so we still kind of have this boutique feeling to us. We obviously we're head first into an economic turn down, right? Or downturn. And we're feeling that as consumers. Knock on wood, Enlisted will post greater revenue and EBITDA than we've ever posted in the history of Enlisted this year. Work is scaling rapidly. I mean, it's because we're shifting what we do a bit, and we've had a couple good breaks over the last few years that we've leaned into, like our partnership with Mr. Beast. He's the number 3 YouTuber in the world. He's got 100 million followers, subscribers. And he came to us because one of our clients, Stan Socks, one of their people left and went to Night Media, which is they represent Mr. Beast. And they said, hey, we think that there's an opportunity for us to use his channel to launch brands. What do you think?
Oh, interesting.
I'm like, well, we create brands from the ground up, so let's do this thing.
Yeah.
So we first launched Mr. Beast Burger, then Mr. Beast Bar. He sold 4 million chocolate bars in the first 90 days. Mr. Beast Burger scaled within a year to 1,200 locations. And then he just opened his first physical location last Sunday, where he had 10,000 people come to his restaurant, and he sold 5,500 burgers, sold out, broke the Guinness Book World Record without even trying. And so part of it is like, yes, we still have our our Purdue chickens and our like big CPG brands, but then we also do a lot of innovation work with smaller brands, as well as now innovating our own brands. And then I'm always looking to like, what's next? And how can we not just be part of it as if we're hitching our wagon, but like how can we create that thing that's next? And that's where our partnership with Mr. Beast has been really interesting over the last couple of years of launching these brands. And it'll just accelerate, both with him and others.
So where was this first restaurant?
So in New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like the American Mall or something
Yeah,
like that.
I know that mall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was insane. You got to check out the footage.
I will.
And it was cool about it. So we did the whole thing. It was about a year in the works. My team was up all weekend, multiple weekends, getting all the menus and everything else, the print, the packaging, digital, everything all ready for it. And then shipped it. Literally shipped it like Friday night. And then they launched Sunday morning. He didn't even say a word. It was a complete secret until Saturday night. He posted a 20-second clip at the end of a 30-minute video where he's like, oh, and by the way, we're going live, Mr. Beast Burger, tomorrow with our first location. 10,000 people showed up.
Oh, my gosh.
It's insane. And then this morning they just announced a partnership with TSG Capital, $100 million investment in Night Media. So it's exciting.
That is
right?
so
It's super exciting. But it's also like, okay, here's this downturn. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What's next? But we've been thinking about what's next years ago. And so now it's like it's coming to fruition.
Wow. That's really
Pretty exciting. Not to say that it can't all go away. No. We all know that as entrepreneurs, it can all go away tomorrow.
Yeah.
But right now, team strong, pipeline strong, and just really, really cool opportunities.
Yeah. But completely like innovating and always thinking about what's next kind of would soften the blow of anything that might like come your way.
Yeah.
In a negative way.
Yeah, for sure. Because you're always thinking about what's next. And lots of times, like our clients say, we're on our 6th or 7th project with Amazon right now, and their briefs are a crack at. Like the brief will come through and it'll say like, help us envision the future of Alexa, period. And so not only are we on that was our first one probably 5-6 years ago. And not only on the forefront of creating what's next for Alexa, but then once we've created that pipeline, now we have pipeline. They need to develop those products. So even though they have 100 designers in-house, they want the fresh thought and they want the innovation and they want the superior design. So they'll come to us for those hero projects.
Yeah.
So let's go back to 2008. You launched Enlisted. You've got some people who are very interested in what you've been doing. You've come from a really big, ID firm. And so how did you think about what Enlisted was going to be? You knew that you wanted it to be all of these experiences, but how did you think about how you're going to set it up, how you were going to market yourself as an agency, how you were going to think about, what Enlisted was going to be for the public?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We're still evolving that story and that strategy, that plan. So I think to fully articulate that, you need to understand there's kind of 3 generations of design within the Bay Area. Generation 1 is IDEO and Frog, okay? And all of us kind of came from IDEO or Frog. So I come from Frog Loin.
Okay.
And the difference was IDEO is like super strategy, a little bit stiff, very methodic, right? That's why they have 52 cards to the process and all that kind of stuff. And then you got Frog and Hartmut. He's just total badass. And he's just like, I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. We're just doing cool stuff. And so they were polar opposites. And so they kind of brought in different types of designers. So I come from the Frog side, where when you look at Gen 1, then you look at Gen 2, from one team at Frog, one team that all worked together, around 2000, within a 2-year period of time, you had 5 studios break off. So you got Astro, Fuse Project, you've got New Deal, Whipsaw, and there's one more that I'm not thinking of. So, and they're Gen 2, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh my gosh, like this is the next generation of design. You've got Yves Bahar on Target commercials, and you've got documentaries being made, and Objectified comes out and introduces the world to industrial design. And so that was cool. And so being part of New Deal, like I was kind of part of that Frog mentality, but there were a few things that were missing for me. First of all, it was all ego driven. It was a founder that was all about themselves and all about what they wanted. And I thought there's got to be a better way, in the sense that, what about the consumer? Who's advocating for the consumer?
Yeah.
What does she want? How about if we design something that she's going to love versus this is going to be great for my portfolio?
Yeah.
That was number 1. Number 2, there's this thing called collaboration. And if we pick our clients right, then they're really smart. Wouldn't we want to sit at the table with them and say, hey, let's co-create something. Let's bring all of the knowledge that you have, and we'll filter it through all the knowledge that we have, and we'll create something that's better than us just bestowing a design upon you. And so that was the second part. That's literally why why I named it Enlisted, because we enlist our clients into our team. We build their trust, and they enlist us into their business team.
I love that.
And so that kind of started happening a little bit on the side, and that's where the 3rd generation. So we were the first ones to break off a 3rd generation. We're the largest studio of the 3rd generation. You've got Enlisted, you've got Branch, you've got Box Clever, you've got Level. Like there's a bunch of really good studios out there right now that are just doing incredible work. And then I am a designer, but I would say I'm more of an entrepreneur than a designer. And that's where, once Enlisted, which kind of got our feet on the ground, we started making investments. And so we had an intern, his name's Jake Miller, awesome guy. He was at Stanford at the time, and he was helping us write a business plan for a brand that we were going to launch out of the studio called Urbio, which we ultimately did launch. And it was on Shark Tank, and we grew the company, spun it off Enlisted, and then sold it. But Jake helped us build a business plan for it. Toward the end of his internship, he came to us and said, hey, I've got an idea, and I'm working with the Stanford D School to do this, that, and the other. Do you want to partner? I said, yeah, let's partner. So we partnered to found Fellow Products. And there's like the best coffee products, the best design, think about every appliance today. Like, you don't want it on your countertop except for Fellow.
Yeah. Can Fellow please make other appliances?
They're working on it.
Okay, good.
The pipeline's deep.
Thank you.
Yes. So it's all going to be around coffee is the thing. Like, Jake is just a coffee fanatic.
Makes sense.
And so it's all going to be around the ritual is what he calls it. And so we partnered with Fellow. We took some equity. We charged like almost nothing to barely cover our costs. And it's turned out really well. Fellow just raised $35 million last year during the pandemic. They've got like 20 plus SKUs now. So we took that model and started investing in companies, especially smaller companies that maybe couldn't afford our fees. And so on one hand, we had the big CPG brands who are paying top dollar. On the other hand, we had innovative products, innovative entrepreneurs that we wanted to work with. And so we were able to discount our fees and take equity in the company. And so today we have a mix of both, and some of those small companies have grown a lot. We had one that was acquired by private equity when we first started working. They were just acquired for $50 million. It was a family-owned business, and then we came in and rebranded, redesigned. They went from 4 feet of shelf space to 180 feet of shelf space, and sold to Nestle for almost $600 million in 4 years.
Wow.
So once we understood kind of, we understood the power of design and branding and marketing, but like once we lived it, then we're like, oh, we need to start replicating this again and again and again for our clients, but also for ourselves.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about, sort of that philosophy of like finding, and doing the work for the customer. How do you as an agency, go about looking and diving into what the customer wants? How are you doing that instead of being ego driven? How does Enlisted, how does Pattern think about that?
So I'd say I'd introduce one other word. So it's ego driven, right? Which is, for me, I call it design for one. And that is the Eve Bahars of the world, who are amazing designers, or at least were, but they design for themselves, right? And then there's data driven design that is like smart design, or even IDEO, where it's like, let's just look at the data, or even a lot of the AI stuff that's coming out, right? Like, use the data, collate the data, and it'll poop out something that obviously everybody loves. And CPG companies do that all the time, right? It's like when we rebranded Purdue Chicken, they had just gone through $1 million rebrand the year before. And they're like, but we're still not hitting it with millennials. And we're like, well, show us the results, show us the quant, show us the qual. So they walk us through their research, and their packaging crushed it in research. Like validation research, qual with groups, with real consumers, crushed it. But no millennials are buying it. Why?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the third part. So instead of ego, it's intuition.
Yeah.
Now, the frog design method is all intuition, right? It's like, what's rad? I love it, ship it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. That's kind of the second generation. Third generation, what we're doing, and why I was so interested in Pattern, is because we're using data and intuition to inform our designs. So we're able to harness, like, all right, just put it in perspective. So Pattern is the third largest reseller on Amazon worldwide. Amazon being the biggest.
Yeah.
Okay. Third largest in the world. Think about the data that we can harvest.
Right.
Reviews, millions and millions of reviews that we can harvest. And then we've written proprietary, like data-driven tools that we can go in and understand exactly what brands are doing and why they're doing that and why they're winning or failing. And so we're able to harness that data in the design process before we ever even go to quant or qual.
Holy moly.
And so we know that the concepts, like the 3 concepts that we're presenting and testing, we know that they're all going to hit.
Yeah.
And so we tell our clients all the time, like we reveal the 3 concepts or whatever it is, and we let them know, like, hey, pressure's off. They're all going to work.
Yeah.
Good news. They're all going to work. Okay. The consumer's going to love any of these. So then we go into kind of like using levers, right? Since all of these are going to work, now let's talk about how we're positioning the brand in the market so that the brand can be where we want it to be. If we want to be a Method or a Clorox, they may have the same products,
right?
Very different brands, very different positionings. So it's more about strategic positioning at that point than it is design.
Yeah.
Well, designing for that positioning.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So thinking about, this is the position that we want to hit. I want to hit millennials. So we need to be this color, take off the racist imagery or whatever it is, depending on what kind of brand you are, right?
Yeah, and that's a good thing to do, like for all brands.
It is. It is. I'm just thinking about a certain
except for maybe
large CPG brand that just did
yes,
that last year.
yes, exactly.
Okay, so tell me a little bit. So it's been you figured out who you wanted to be, what you wanted your company to be. How did you? I want to move a little bit more into Silicon Slopes. So, how did you as an organization decide to move from Oakland and the Valley to, here?
Yeah. So my entire context is Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Right? That's my whole growing up. It was my whole career, like going to school at the Academy of Art in San Francisco. You're going to school so that you can work at Apple or IDEO or whoever, right, in the Valley.
Right.
And so all of our tours, all of our the Academy students are coming. It was all those companies, right? That's where you're going. And so that was it. And that was my entire career. That's all that I needed, was to create the best design agency in the Valley, in San Francisco, in the Bay, which is great. And we are. But I kept picking up clients in Utah.
Oh, okay.
And we kept flying out here.
Yeah.
And there was this one moment, I think we were coming back from a Control 4 presentation or something like that. They're here in Salt Lake. And I'm driving north, about to go west to the airport. And there's that big swooping turn. And I'm looking downtown and I'm like, I know that some tier 1 agency is going to open a studio here. Like, I know they are. And if I don't do it first, I'm going to kick myself. And so that was kind of the impetus of starting to think about what if.
And so when was this?
It was probably 6 years ago.
Okay.
And what was it that made you want to come here? What was it about, the slopes here that you said somebody's going to do it?
Yeah. So first of all, there's a lot of innovation happening, right? A lot of companies coming in, like the Adobe building had been built, and it was like that was kind of the flagship, right? Of like, oh, Adobe's here. What is this? And it started to raise interest. So picking up clients was one thing, but there is so having spent most of my life in the Bay, there was in the Bay Area back in the 90s this all ships rise mentality where it's just like we're all a bunch of nerds, we're doing really cool stuff, and we're going to change the world. And everybody kind of rooted for each other. That doesn't exist as much anymore in the Bay Area because you have so many giants there who are just pissing all over each other.
Jeez.
And so it's really challenging, and it's just so big, and there's just so much ego and so much money there. And that's as a result of, what we all did in the 90s and early 2000s. And so it's not a bad thing. It just is. And so the spirit of it has changed. And then when I start getting into this Utah Silicon Slopes community, I start realizing, not only is there an all ships rise mentality, but it's at a greater level than I've ever experienced before anywhere. And that was like on an emotional level, that's why I wanted to be part of this.
Yeah.
And it's truer than I even realized back then.
Did you see yourself actually moving here at the time? Yeah.
No, I didn't think it'd be a cultural fit. And I only knew parts of Utah and loved parts of Utah and did not love other parts of Utah. And so it just wasn't in the cards. And that was okay. We'd come to Utah, we'd go to Moab, and my in-laws moved to Utah.
Okay.
All of my in-law siblings had moved to Utah at that point or were moving to it. So we were here quite a bit. We didn't know Salt Lake at all. We knew other areas. And so it was not in the cards. And then the plan was to open, once I decided I'm going to open a Salt Lake studio, was to open the studio here and commute out.
Yeah.
And I realized that wasn't going to work. And
why not?
So there's a guy named Jason Bangerter. I've only met with him once, and he was super cool. This is a perfect example of All Ships Rise. I hit him up on LinkedIn. He has no clue who I am, right? And I'm like, hey, my name's Beau. I'm Enlisted. I'm thinking about opening a Salt Lake studio. Could I pick your brain sometime? He responds, let me know when you're in town next time. I'll have you over to lunch. Yeah. He has me over to Rentler for lunch. We sit in his office for like 2 hours.
Oh, nice.
And he was the one that told me, he's like, if you're going to do this, you have to be part of the community. It's not going to work.
Oh, really?
If you're this Bay Area person trying to do something in Utah, you have to be here. And so I just kind of, kept thinking about it. I'm sure I called my wife on the way back to the airport that day and I was like, hey.
Yeah.
And she's super entrepreneurial as well. And so it was never a hard no. It's just like, let's think about that. What does that look like for our family and for our lives? And so then it began to resonate a little bit more. And each time I would come out, I would spend I'd go to a presentation with X client and then I'd spend like half the day driving around Salt Lake and like, what if? And so then I just realized, like, if I'm going to do this, I'm all in. I have to be all in. And so I met with my senior leadership team in Oakland, and I said, hey, for the Salt Lake studio, because this was already a when, not an if.
Yeah.
When we launched Salt Lake studio, I think that I'm going to move there, and then I'll come back to Oakland every week. So the first year and a half, 2 years, we moved to Salt Lake, and then and bought a house in Salt Lake, just up from the studio, and then I commuted back to Oakland every single week for 2 years.
And are you still commuting?
I leave tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. You're still making it work.
No, so I'm not commuting though. So when the pandemic hit, we had already been set up for remote because we had 2 locations.
Okay.
And so we already had Slack in place. We already had Mural in place. Like we had the tools that we needed to be able to be one team across 2 locations. And so when the pandemic hit, it's like, okay, we know what to do.
Yeah.
Everybody bring your stuff home. Like we're
Yeah.
home now. And so then I stopped commuting for about a year and then started kind of trickling the commute back up after about a year and a half for specific projects and clients. And now it's really just as needed. I go back to Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around what, as you've moved here, what are you excited about marketing design in the Silicon Slopes community? What could be improved upon? You know, what do you see here? You know, you talked about the general vibe of like everybody's being good, but you know, tell me what you like and what you don't like. What could be improved upon in the community?
Yeah, you want to start with the...
You start with wherever
what
you
do you
want.
say? Do you want the good news or the bad news first?
I want news.
All right.
So either way.
That's good. Fair enough. So a couple of things that we've noticed as we've made this shift and dedicated more time and effort and interest in the Utah market, there is a double-edged sword of entrepreneurialism and scrappiness here. So on one hand, you have people who are working 50 hours of their job every week and have a side hustle out of their garage, and they're making it happen. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Right? Congratulations. I love that scrappiness, right? But it isn't very strategic most of the time. Usually it's just like, you know, I'm just doing this because I'm a worker, I'm a builder. The downside of that is that they're not investing in creating something meaningful. It's more of like, how can I make money, or how can I do this thing, or how can I get this going, versus creating a brand that people are going to, that you can either create a category around, or that consumers are going to want to be part of.
Yeah.
Or employees are going to want to be part of. And we're seeing more brands now than ever, which is great. But we still, like, we'll get invited to come to, you know, a company and pitch to them, right? Or say, hey, we've heard of Enlisted. Do you want to come and talk about whatever? So we'll come in, you know, the CEO, CMO, whatever. And so we'll present, and they're like, listen, we love this. We love the work. Like, you know, they're like, I'm wearing my Allbirds right now. Like, you designed that? I was like, yeah. So everybody's all happy and excited, and then they'll give us an RFP. We'll put a proposal together, and they're like, so this is $1.5 million. And we're like, yeah, I mean, we did like our like startup pricing. And they're like, oh no, I have a neighbor whose daughter is studying graphic design at BYU, and she can do it for, like, she said, like $1,500. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. Like, if that's the conversation we're having, we've already billed more than that. So, if that's what you want, we should have established that from the beginning. Like, you should hire her if that's what you want to do. That's great. Yeah. And we see that. We actually just saw it with a company that'll probably do about $200 million in sales this year here in Utah. And we had 4 or 5 meetings with the CEO. I really liked him. Thought he was super smart. Loved the business that he's been. Loved the product that he's making. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it came down to we can just get an intern to come and do this. And that's why every SKU looks different. And that's why the brand isn't building the way that it could. And so that's where we're totally okay with companies who aren't ready for that level of design, because there's plenty of graphic designers out there who can do that, or industrial designers who can do that. I think where we're starting to see a switch, and I started to see it even within our client base or potential client base in Utah, was companies who have imported or hired in people from Apple, from Samsung, from the Bay or New York or other places, who come, like Control4, for example, would have never hired Enlisted until a certain product manager named Margie, who's just a total badass. She came from Apple to Control4. And when she came there, she's like, why does every single one of our products look different? Like, who's designing these? Yeah. And it's because they've been paying $10K, $20K, whatever, with these different studios or freelancers or whoever. And it was just all over the place. And so she came and brought in Ammunition and Fuse Project and Enlisted and whatever to, like, bid against each other. We won the bid, we won the client, and we've been working together for like 6 years now to bring cohesion across every single one of those. But it took somebody in their leadership team to say, hey,
to rally for that cause.
Here's why this matters. Here's why good design is good business. So and we're launching 3 new products in 2 weeks at the CDS show with them. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, we sell design here in Utah, so we hear you. But tell me from your perspective why that matters to a company. And I just hit the table, so they're going to be mad at me. But tell me why it matters to a company that they should care that their products all look the same. From your perspective, why does that make a better long-term ROI for a brand than hiring, you know, a $1,500 intern from BYU?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's not that we're appropriate for every company at every stage.
Right.
Totally.
Right? And that's okay. Like, we're not hungry for work. So it's like, if you're at a stage where it's just like, just get something on Amazon and test it, we may not be the right fit. And that's all right, right? Go and learn and test. And as you grow and you have some positive revenue and positive EBITDA, then let's talk. it's really a company who is either starting out with a vision to create a market category leader, or they've grown their company sufficiently that now they can make their big play to become that market category leader. So oftentimes, I don't want to say 50%, but I'd say oftentimes we're brought in from private equity or VC. So we work with Andreessen Horowitz, we work with Lower Carbon Capital, Chris and Crystal Saka. We work with Peterson Partners here in Utah. A lot of different VCs who are targeting in much better ways than we can companies who are ready to go national or international. And that's usually where it's the right fit for us. So we don't have to sell in design all that often, just in the sense that, okay, you're ready for hyper growth and you're ready to show up on the shelves at Whole Foods and actually compete.
Yeah.
Like that's beyond just, oh, I got a meeting with the buyer. That's now we're going to create something that's going to earn you 4 feet of shelf set that consumers are going to advocate for on Instagram. And you're never going to get that from the like ultra scrappy, oh, my daughter put this thing together for us. Like it's not going to happen, right? It'd be like a SaaS company saying, oh, we're going to be the biggest SaaS company, but we have no proprietary tech. Like that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with a product or a consumer brand where they need to invest in the brand and in the positioning and in every single touch point that they're going to reach out to their consumer with so that the consumer wants to be part of it. And that's where you reach that level that we call craveable brands, where it's beyond just I'll buy it. It's I can't stop thinking about it. Or even, I don't even know what that is, but I want it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And that grows businesses, right? So you have all these companies, it kills me. You have all these companies who are all concerned about ROAS, are all concerned about ad spend. They're dumping millions into ad spend and marketing. And like nobody wants to buy their product because they didn't invest in the consumer lusting after the product. That's what they really didn't. They didn't invest in the emotional connection between a human and an inanimate object. So when you invest in that and it's done right, and the challenge is that some companies are like, but we did that. We hired this agency and they said they were the best and it didn't move the needle. And I'm like, all right, let me see the work.
Yeah.
And that's where we can come in and say that was clearly designed by intuition for their portfolio. I'm sorry that you fell for that. There's a better way.
Yeah.
And it has to do with data, has to do with consumers, has to do with intuition, it has to do with the right design team. Now let us show you what we've done for Allbirds and Stance and Amazon and Mr. Beast and you name it. If that's what you want, there's a reason that Mr. Beast is the top YouTuber brand. If that's what you want, then let's talk.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that's been really interesting looking at your portfolio and your career at Enlisted is like how many different brands that look and feel different are coming out of your studio. One of the things that you talked about, you know, when you're a designer of one, like some of these Gen 2s, a lot of the designs look similar.
Yeah.
You know that that's from them. You know, when you think about Enlisted design and now what you're doing with Pattern and, you know, some of these other brands, how are you configuring how to push out the right design and the right marketing for those companies rather than just something that you as an organization like or want?
Yeah. Thanks for recognizing that.
It's very clear.
Cool. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's a huge compliment.
Yeah.
Whereas for Gen 2, that would be a huge diss.
Interesting.
I meant it as both of those.
Yeah, good. Because you recognize, right, that is what it is. And we do that very much on purpose. That is a strategic decision to put the consumer and that brand first versus us.
But how do you do that? Like, we think about that for Modern 8 and our clients, you know, the stuff that we're pushing out is often very different from, you know, banks to, you know, CPG brands or whatever. But from you as an organization, how do you think about putting out the right thing for the company rather than just something that is right for you as an organization?
I would imagine it's not all that different than your process, right? So the strategy team leads phase 1, and that really is a deep dive into the consumer, to consumer sentiment. What are they buying? What are they reviewing? What do they care about? Yeah. And then going into the market, understanding the shelf set, understanding what's been happening from a macro and a micro trend level over the last few years within that category. Once we understand that, we now have a clear view of the landscape of that category and of that consumer. Then we go into what we call vision boards, different than mood boards. A mood board is very specific to, like, if you're designing a phone, you're going to have a mood board around the phone.
Yeah.
And what phones and what would be aspirational for a phone design. A vision board takes a step out about 10,000 feet and says, what is the world in which this consumer lives? What does she love? What does she buy? What is she interested in? And so you could have a vision board with 5 images. You could have a vision board with 20 images. And it could be everything from type to architecture to transportation to apparel to colors to materials to finishes to products.
Is it kind of like a visual persona, if you will?
A little bit, yeah,
Okay.
a little bit. So now you have the data of the persona themselves and what they're interested in, and it's usually not so much. It's you have to kind of aggregate data and can it, but you have that, and then you have this kind of snapshot or vision for what's going to be aspirational for them.
Aspirational, that makes sense.
Then we can look at the market and say, okay, here's what's aspirational for them today, but we're creating what's aspirational for them tomorrow. And that's where, as futurists, we're able to look into the future and say, here's where we're going, not just because of what we think, but what we're creating. And that's where it enables us to, like, for example, if I was these are all design studios I respect and we work with, but like Hatch Design or Character in San Francisco, like amazing design agencies, right? I love their work. But they design for them, like Hatch. Anytime you see a Hatch, packaging, it's like Hatch did that for sure, right? And that's great, and that's why companies go to them, because they want the Hatch treatment. And so because we design for many, we have our hands in so many different categories. We know what boat they're buying next year because we're freaking designing it right now.
Right.
We know what shoes they bought and what shoes that packaging came in because we designed it last year.
Yeah.
Like, we know what kitchen appliances they would actually put on top of their counter rather than having to tuck it away every time because we designed them.
Yeah.
And because we have our hands in so many different categories, but we're doing it what's right for that brand in that category, we're able to we're able to aggregate all of that. I guess you could call it data, but it's more than that. We're able to aggregate that into a vision for what's appropriate for that brand, that consumer, not at that time, because it's actually a year from now,
Right.
or 2 years from now. That's how we do it. And it takes a lot of people to do that.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the reasons why we are 60 people. I still think of us as like 20 people.
Yeah.
We act like we're 20 people. But we're 60 because we need the people, like the absolute experts, to do that. So we don't do a lot in the studio of, like, for example, I hired a graphic designer from Fuse Project once, and I was so excited to work with her because she was kind of the first person we hired away from Fuse. And so, in her first week, I sat down with her. I'm like, okay, so tell me everything. What's it really like? Right? Because I had designers leave Enlisted and go to Fuse. And one of my most respected designers that kind of taught me design at New Deal, he left and went to Fuse. And so I had people in there, but they were still there. And so they're never going to give me the inside scoop. So I'm like, tell me everything. And she's like, okay, let's see. As the lead graphic designer at Fuse Project, I sit around about 75 industrial designers, mostly men, like 99% dudes. And I basically get shit on all day, and they don't respect me. And I get these scraps of design to do packaging or a logo or whatever, and they don't understand what I do. And I was just like, my hypothesis was correct.
Yeah.
This sucks. So when I started hiring at Enlisted, industrial designers were actually some of my last hires because my partner and I were both industrial designers.
Yeah.
So we hired branding designers, identity designers, packaging designers, but absolute experts in their field. So it wasn't like, hey, industrial designer, go do this packaging, or hey, graphic designer, do like it. We weren't like saying design across all. We wanted the absolute expert designers within their micro field to be able to come together and work together as one team to create these cohesive experiences.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done.
Amazing.
It's working.
Yeah.
Clearly.
I'd say.
So tell me about the pattern joint. How did this happen?
Dude, this is where it gets exciting.
What, like, it's the smile on your face clearly says how much it's fun for you. So tell me about how that came about and what sort of the role is on the day-to-day from the Enlisted team versus the pattern team, and how that sort of merges.
Yeah, for sure. So over the last 15 years, my goal has always been to hire the best, right? And not just like the best designers, but the best people. And that's one thing that you'll notice anytime you work with Enlisted or interact with them. It's just really good people and like hustlers, and they work hard, they do really good work, and they have fun. And so throughout the years, I had different offers, like different companies courting us to join their organization. So Google came on really hard a number of years ago, wanted me to join and lead their X group, and the people that I was interacting with were fine, but like it wasn't going to allow me to attract the right designers at Enlisted that I wanted, both talent and personalities. And then there was another agency, kind of same kind of thing. It was never right. And so I finally just said, hey, I'm never going to sell Enlisted. We'll always be Enlisted, and we're just going to grow and do our thing exactly how we want. So then I opened the Salt Lake studio in almost 3 years ago. And then in 2020, January of 2020, spoke at Silicon Slopes on how to create how to create a luster
Yeah,
brand.
I remember this.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And I invited some of my friends to come be on the panel. So Kingman from Stance, I had Jason Kimball was on. I think Brad Williams was there with us. Like just a few different like people. The founder of Albion was there. What's her name? She's awesome. She was there. So it's just kind of some friends of mine to come.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about brands. So I spoke on we did this panel on how to create a lustful brand. Then we're all like chatting and whatever. The room sat 400 people. We had 650 people in the room. Clearly, Utah was interested in how to create a lustful brand. Okay, it looked like an encampment. There were people like on the ground, and like it was really fun. So then afterwards, I'm just talking with a couple of clients that were there, and we're chatting, and the next person gets up on the stage to start speaking, and I'm like, oh, let's sit down, So we sit down, not to be rude, and we start listening, and this guy gets up, and he's like the biggest nerd I've ever heard, like really, and he claims it, like he owns it. He gets up, and he's just like, my name's Dave Wright, and I'm the co-founder of Pattern, and I can pretty much guarantee you I'm the biggest nerd in this room. And I'm like, all right, this guy's rad because he knows exactly who he is, and he's leaning in. And so then he begins to reveal this whole thing that he's creating called Pattern, where they can take brands that people want, okay, and take them on e-com, and they can accelerate their growth at a rate using their proprietary technology that nobody's ever experienced before. And he's giving numbers. Like I was thinking, is this NDA proof? Like, is this okay? But he's giving these numbers where I'm just like, oh my God, like every single one of my clients needs this Pattern thing, right? And so afterwards, I'm like, I gotta go talk to this guy. So I peel away and I go over, and there's a line of like 25 people waiting for him.
Oh my God.
And I'm just like, who is this? What is this? And so I wait a couple minutes or whatever, and then and I go up and introduce myself. And he's like, oh, some of my VPs were in your thing. We need to talk. And I'm like, I don't know what we need to talk about, but here's what it comes down to. I know how to create brands that people love. You know how to accelerate those online. We should collaborate. Like, let's launch our own brands. And he's like, that's what we've been trying to do, and we don't know how to do it. Like, great. Let's talk. So a couple months later, we get on the calendar, go visit him. We're in the boardroom at their old office, and he brings in like pretty much the whole leadership team for this. Like little by little, he keeps peeling people in. And so brings them in, we give the Enlisted pitch, me thinking, hey, let's just do something together.
Yeah.
That day he calls me to his office and he's like, I need Enlisted. Like Enlisted needs to be part of Pattern. And I'm like, oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Not for sale.
Yeah.
End of conversation. And he's just like, I don't think so.
He's like, I'm not going to give up.
So every week for 6 weeks, he invites me back to his office, and we spend an hour together. And he just, it got to the point where we understood each other's vision. We understood the type of people that were there. Really good people at Pattern, really talented. He's recruited people who are like Enlisted, like the best at what they do, but also like really nice and really just this all ships rise mentality. And so I can see that as I'm meeting people and kind of getting comfortable with the idea. And on the 6th week, he drops a bomb on me, and he goes, Beau, you know my business model. You know where I want to go. I know your business model, and I know where you're going. But I can do more with Enlisted than you can. And I'm like, damn. What? Who says that?
Wow.
And so then he hands me a dry erase marker, and he says, just write it up.
Yeah.
What do you need for us to make this happen? Because we need to launch brands together. And so we just built out a business model together and what it would take. And that day, she's like, okay, let's go.
Wow.
And so it took about 6 months to actually, go through due diligence and all that. So we sold Enlisted entirely to, now it's my wife and I at that point, because I bought my previous business partner out. So we sold Enlisted to Pattern, and then I became chief design officer of Pattern and Enlisted. I still run Enlisted about 80% of my time, 75-80% of my time is with Enlisted, about 25% of my time is with Pattern, both as a leadership team as well as the brands that we're now launching with Village Brands. So we started a third entity together, essentially as partners, called Village Brands, villagebrands.com, and we're launching our own brands through it.
So cool.
So it's really exciting.
Yeah, that is so exciting.
We're using everything that Pattern is to be able to bring the data into the Enlisted process for our clients, as well as our own brands, and then launching them onto the Pattern platform. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is great.
And it doesn't exist. Like, there's no playbook for this. Right. It could be a massive failure, okay? But I don't think it's going to be.
No.
But there's no playbook. Like, we don't know what we're doing other than what we do at Enlisted and what they do at Pattern. And we feel like we're the best at what we do, and they feel like they're the best at what they do. And it's like coming together has been way more seamless than we thought it would be.
That's great.
Partly because we still run autonomously. Yeah. So even though it's owned by Pattern, we still run Enlisted autonomously.
It feels like a client relationship between those.
Yeah, it's like a very intimate client relationship. Yeah.
We like this.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch to the future. So tell me what you expect to see. You're a futurist. Tell me what you expect to see in marketing design. The world over the next 5 to 10 years. And I'd love to hear from what's going to happen here in the slopes versus the world.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the slopes are somewhat of a microcosm of the world. I think that we have a pretty big challenge of diversity of thought here, but that's changing. Within the world, there's so much that's shifting, right? Like, you feel it. It's so shifty right now. Everything is. And so for me to say this is what's going to happen, like Elon did a couple months ago in his TED interview. That was a rad interview, by the way. Like, at the factory, it's good. I'm not an Elon Musk, right?
Okay.
Like, he is the person who say, here are the 5 things that are going to happen,
right,
and here's why I'm making these happen, and that's cool. I love it.
Yeah,
I'm not that person. But what I can see is a couple of kind of macro trends happening. Companies who would never have invested in design or even considered it important are now woke to the idea that it is important. There are brands that are forced to, or maybe even leading the charge to, look at the consumer and consider what they need and to consider what they want and to invest in that need versus just investing in marketing as a ROAS or as a dollars return. So actually investing in the people and the cause that they're behind, that's happening. And I think that benefits us as designers because we're able to bring a lot of empathy into the work that we do and into consideration for the consumer. And we're seeing that across SaaS. We're seeing that across healthcare. We're seeing that across, certainly tech and lifestyle. And so while certain brands are really cool, like, Stance, like when Stance called, and that's one of those days where you're just like, yeah, I'm wearing my Stance socks right now. Let's talk. Right? It's really exciting. I love it. I love the brand. And so the work that we do is really meaningful to help them grow that category, grow the brand. But there's other brands that are really, really interesting to us that we're working with because of the innovation that they're bringing to a category. So like healthcare, for example. Hims and Hers, if you're familiar with Hims, pretty basic model, right? It's like Viagra. They market it toward these 65-year-old dudes, and they're frolicking with their girlfriend in Europe in a commercial. And you're like, yeah, I've seen it before. What if we just took a piece of that, 20 milligrams, and we made it available to 20-year-olds, and we marketed it to them? Boom! Now you have $1 billion Hims opportunity, right? Awesome. I love it. So taking categories like that haven't, what we call, been loved, and loving the category is what the future is. So a couple others, Hims is a good example of that. Another example is Quip. So Simon is a friend of mine. He's the founder of Quip toothbrushes.
Yeah, we love those.
Quip's great, right?
Yeah.
I used it this morning.
Perfect. It's the first toothbrush that you would actually want in your bathroom or in your mouth for that matter, right?
Yeah.
But you don't think about it. You go down the aisle like Simon did, and he's just like, why are all the toothbrushes designed in 93? How has there been no love here? There's been innovation, which is mostly marketing BS, but there hasn't been love. And so I think the future for a lot of us in the creative space is, and also just in the entrepreneurial space, is how can we love a category that hasn't been loved? And how can we love the consumer who is shopping that category? And if we could think about it in that way, then that emotion drives the fundraise and the idea and the entrepreneur to do something. And then it also drives the result. And you now have products and brands and packaging and what, digital experiences that consumers are going to love. That brings happiness.
Yeah.
It does. So a quick story about that.
Yeah.
Okay. And why this? So I haven't told this for a while. When I was like 5, we lived in Carmel Valley in this little duplex, and I didn't grow up with money. We were super, super normal people. And it was summer, and I remember sitting on the steps outside of our little duplex and just crying because my mom, there's 4 boys in my family. And so during the summer, like my mom had to just lock us out of the house to like go play. I need some time.
Yeah.
And rightly so. And so we were out playing or whatever, and I was bored, but I more just felt like kind of useless, I would say, more than bored. And so I'm sitting on the little steps there, and I'm crying, and my mom comes out and puts her arm around me, and she's like, all right, Beau, what's going on? I'm like, Mom, I don't want to just go play. Like, I want to do something that's going to change the world.
Oh my.
And she's like, she just squeezes me. I'm sure she's just like, oh. And she's just like, you will. And so as I thought about that, like there's different ways to change the world, right? And there's different micro, macro ways in which we can change the world. And we do a lot of work in sustainability and Enlisted and with materials and processes that are helping to change, processes that'll help the earth. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, we're creating stuff that's going to go in landfills. That's a really tough reality as designers. It really is. So even if it's fully compostable, like the Allbirds packaging, it's fully 90 days, that packaging doesn't exist anymore. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's other work that we're doing that's along those lines right now. So that's great. But I feel like that's going to become table stakes and needs to become table stakes. But what even more importantly needs to happen is that this love needs to be inserted into what we do, why we do it, and then ultimately what is offered to the consumer, to the end user. So a SaaS company may say, well, I'm B2B. I really don't need to, come on. But I would challenge to say, if anyone is going to use your product, could it be a highlight in their day?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Right? Like we're working with a company called Blend Tech right now. They're a Utah-based company. And traditionally, 100% engineered. Like no design or very little design. I shouldn't say that. Very little design, very engineered. Consumers pick these things up and put them under their counter every single time because they're not worthy of the countertop. Yeah. Well, wouldn't it be great if your 60 seconds of interaction with a Blend Tech blender could actually be a highlight of your day? Yeah. That you could be proud of it on your kitchen countertop. That's really exciting to me. And so I think as companies from consumer brands, consumer products, it could be a granola bar, a protein bar, it could be a blender, it could be an electric boat that we're designing. Like I want to make sure that ARC boats, like when you get on our ARC boat, our electric boat.
I was looking at those the other day.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
excited about them. Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
You should be very excited about
I'm very excited. Yes.
When you get on ARC and the motor doesn't crap out like your gas motor did, and oil doesn't spill out when you refill it, and it goes for 8 hours at 100% torque and can pull you out of the water like nothing you've ever experienced before, that brings joy.
Yeah.
And so I'd say, yes, we're in the business of design, and yes, we're in the business of growing your brand, growing your company. But more than anything, we're in the business of creating an emotional connection between a consumer and these inanimate objects, that if we do our job right, we're creating joy.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
All right, a couple more questions, and then we'll let you go do all the important work you need to do. But what I'd love to hear from your perspective is what would you like marketers to know about the stuff that you care about and think about as a designer? What should a young marketer know that you can help them to understand how to go about their business? Either designer or marketer to learn to do better work.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll just kind of keep on this wave a little bit. Simon Sinek is the one who coined it. It was there far before him, but just understanding the why. And why are they doing what they're doing, especially in their marketing career? They're going to choose different companies to join. Why that company, why that consumer, why that experience? And so if we can start with the why, then we have an understanding of how we can begin to create that connection, that emotional connection. Yeah. So yes, data is important. Yes, ROAS is important. Yes, all of the metrics and all of the tools are important. I would say to the young marketer, learn the tools. you have to have mastery, like absolute mastery over those tools, but only to the point where they enable you to create something special. And so thinking at that more emotive level is really important, so that their goal is to create something special, to create an experience that's going to bring that joy. You know, I mean, that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's the same with designers. Like the first 5 years of a designer's career, it's really just for them to master the tools.
Yeah.
And they should continue, right? Like we're working with tools even in a beta form right now, like Adobe beta form, that like they're next level tools. And so we're always growing.
Yeah.
We're always trying to figure out like what's that next tool. But only so that we can master it, so that we can express something that's going to bring joy to a consumer.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here's the most important question. What bar, restaurant, coffee shop should somebody in town frequent?
Okay. So,
And I guess thinking about it holistically,
okay.
you know,
Yeah.
design, experience.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That changes my answer drastically.
I want both then.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you the first one. The first one that comes to mind. So when we first moved here, so my wife and I are both from the Bay Area,
Yeah.
both from California, our whole lives, born and raised. And we came here and we're like, all right, show us the taco joints. Like we eat tacos.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing here with like, we didn't know they're called hot plate Mexican restaurants, and I hate them. Okay.
Wait, what does that mean?
It's like a red iguana type thing where it's
okay.
like you get this burrito that's smothered in
Yeah.
enchilada sauce and then like rice and beans.
The-
and I'm
the
like,
plate is hot.
why? And the plate's
And you
literally
can't
the plate
see
is
the
hot.
plate.
Yeah.
You can't see the plate, right? And I'm like, what is all this stuff? Where's my taco? And it just doesn't make sense to me. It can be delicious, right?
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
Red iguana is amazing.
Yeah,
but it's just not what we like tacos.
Okay.
And so we're like, where's a taco joint? So we go to like Taqueria 27. We're like, oh, these are really fancy, nice white person tacos. And then we go to like some other taqueria, and we found a place. So my wife's sister was like, well, I've heard about this place called Chunga's.
Yeah.
You got to check out
we love
Chunga's.
It's amazing.
The Al Pastor.
Not open on Mondays.
Dude, it's
Yeah,
so
Sundays and
good.
Mondays,
It's so good. So Gloria is she runs Chunga's, and she's just awesome. And we've had her cater. We've had her cater work events, family
Yeah.
events.
Oh,
Like we go there all the
wonderful.
time. We walk in, and she's just like, hey.
Yeah.
So
Corn
Chunga's the
tortillas,
best, dude.
Quesadilla.
Oh, it's so
I love
good.
the corn quesadilla.
It's the best thing to get there.
It is. It
It's
is.
the
And
best.
if you get the Nino one, it's only like $2.
Oh, it is?
Oh.
I didn't know that was
Yeah, I didn't
available.
know there was
for
a
sure.
small one.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
I
so
also
good.
need the big one, so
Yeah,
it's fine.
yeah,
I'm glad I did.
well, that's in addition to your
Oh,
Al
yeah.
Pastor tacos.
I still need the big one. Yeah.
So that's the best.
Okay.
And it's like super grungy. It's like hole in the
Gas
wall.
station.
Like
Yeah.
you may get sick, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So Chunga's, and then from an overall like experience, there was a place that just closed called Ginger Street that was really good.
Oh.
That was a fun
My neighbor
vibe.
across the street owned that one. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Something new's coming in there. It's gonna be cool.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, we just went, my wife and I just went for dinner the other night and walked up, and we're all stoked about it. And it was
Yeah.
closed.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
So that's really good. There's a spot for sushi. We've tried a bunch of different sushi places, but our favorite is Tsunami. It's really good. The Ninth and Ninth Tsunami is really
Okay.
good.
I haven't been to that one yet.
It's good. They're all good. They're all the same.
Yeah.
We
And
love Sapa.
I'm a veg, so it's
Yeah.
like they have like a whole line of
okay.
veggie,
Oh,
Okay,
cool.
noted.
rolls that are really good. And at Chunga's, I get the nopales, and they have
Oh, yeah.
flowers
Yeah.
too. That's really good.
Oh, yeah.
So you can still go veg.
Do they still have the? I haven't been there in a year or two, but do they still have the broccoli flour?
Yeah. So
It's
it's
so
it's
good.
not broccoli flour though. It's
Zucchini flour.
zucchini flour.
That's what it
That's
is,
the
yeah.
flour ones. Yeah. I
And
love them.
It's so good.
They're
It's
so
maybe
good.
the best thing on the menu.
It's so good.
It's so good.
People don't realize. And then we always have her like melt cheese on it too
Yeah.
for us, and it gets all
So
crispy. It's so good. So that's really good. And then we spend a lot of time in Moab. So we just bought some property down there. We're going to build a container house.
Oh,
so,
cool.
Like old shipping containers that are made into a modern house. So we're building a shipping. Is a company called Hono Mobo. Really goofy name. They're out of
Yeah.
British Columbia. So we're working with them to design out the house. And there's a restaurant down there called Antica Forma.
Okay.
And it's just this like it's a divey Italian place, and like right on Moab's main strip, and they make their own burrata. And I love burrata.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I only had burrata for the first time, like when we did that cheese
Oh yeah.
Oh, you were working with a cheese brand?
Caputo's.
Oh,
Well,
Caputo's,
yeah,
yeah.
Caputo's. I'd never
Yeah.
had burrata.
Yeah, it's so good. So they make their
Can't
own
look back
burrata
now.
also. And inside, I'm going to say this wrong. So anybody who speaks Italian is going to be like, this guy doesn't know what he's saying. About. Inside, there's this stuff called, I think it's like stracciatella or something like that. And it's like the creamy, stringy cheese inside the ball. And when I was in Florence a number of years ago, I went to this deli and they had this huge glass container full of like yogurt, basically, it looked like. And I'm like, what is that? And they're like, oh, inside of the burrata. And I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Like, that's an entire jar
Yeah.
of the stuff inside of burrata. And they serve it to you with a ladle into a cup and then give you like a little frozen yogurt spoon. And I had 2 cups like immediately sitting there. It was so good. So
Amazing.
Yeah, Antica Forma, amazing little Italian joint in Moab.
Okay.
Great.
Those are good recommendations.
Those are my spots.
Yeah, I love
They're
it.
all
Thank
kind
you.
of hole in the wall. We love eating out, but we're not like expensive foodies.
Yeah.
Like even in the Bay Area, we still have an Alice Waters restaurant. What's it called?
I don't know where a restaurant.
What's her?
I know
It's in
her.
Berkeley. Yeah, so Alice Waters has a restaurant. It has since like the
Okay.
70s in Berkeley, and I've been a number of times. It's amazing. We still have a gift card because it's just so
yeah.
like fancy for us
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
don't go.
Yeah,
So-
we have a client that's a Michelin 3-star restaurant out there.
Oh my
and
gosh.
it's amazing. It's the best food.
yeah.
It was the last meal we ate before the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's still. I wouldn't want to eat it every day.
yeah, for sure,
know,
for sure.
you know.
And the experience is fun.
Yeah.
It's
But I'm
amazing.
like so like I just like give me some tacos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me either hang out with my family or get back to work.
Yeah. Love
Yep.
that.
Yep. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much
yeah.
for spending the time. I hit the table again, so they're gonna be mad at me. But we are excited about what you're doing, and thanks for all you do here in the city.
Yeah, so excited to be part of
Thanks.
it. Really am. Thanks for having
Good.
me.
Thank
All
you.
right. By Subjects is a production of Modern 8 Agency in Silicon Slopes. Executive producers are Alysha Smith and Peter Stevenson. Editor and producer is Dave Meekum. Video production by Connor Mitchell. Development production by Eric Dahl. Production management by Shelby Sandlin. Original music composed by Josh Johnson. Website designed by Modern 8. Please make sure to follow and share the show with your friends and your enemies. Thanks for joining us.